Hello, this is Miss Cliffner coming at you with your lesson for the next section of our textbook, and it is all about percents. But first we want to look at the connection between ratios, fractions, and percents. So there's your homework. Here's what we're going to do. There is a warm-up that's asking you to come up with some common everyday examples of when you come across percents. Go ahead and see if you can think about 3 areas in life where we use percents, and then I want you to try to rewrite fractions with a denominator of 100. So what I want you to think about is when we create an equivalent fraction, it's like extending the ratio table, and I want the denominator to be 100. So I'm putting 100 as a denominator next to all 3 of these fractions, and then I want you to think about the pattern, right? As the number gets bigger, it's multiplication. So we were trying to figure out the multiplication pattern in the denominator, because whatever you multiply the bottom by, you're going to multiply the top by. So the numerator and denominator get multiplied by the same number. Go ahead and try your warm-up. It's in the key to the notes online. All right, let's just get into the lesson. Again, the essential question is, what's the connection between ratios, fractions, and percents? They're all different ways to say the same thing mathematically, or to say the equivalent thing mathematically. Okay, so now we're talking about ratios are considered to be fractions when they are a part-to-whole relationship. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill in these words into the sections that they belong in. Okay, so here we go. You know that there's ratios that are part-to-part, and you know that there are ratios that are whole-to-part. But the idea is a fraction is the only time you can consider it a fraction is if it is a part to a whole ratio, even though it looks like a fraction and acts like a fraction when it's part to part and whole to part. So here's our examples, right? Remember, you guys were doing, let's just erase the pen there. There we go. So in other words, right, when I look at this, if I want part to part, I could do this. I could do what's the part that's red compared to the part that's blue. And it would count 1, 2, 3, 4 red and 2 blue. So it was 4 to 2. And when I simplify that ratio, it's also equal to 2 to 1. So we can see that there's twice as many red stars as blue. Now remember, the part to part doesn't necessarily tell you about how many there are altogether. It just gives you a comparison. For every 2 red stars, there's 1 blue. And then remember, whole to part will be, well, I could count. There was 4 black, 4 red, there's 10 altogether. So if I do a whole to part ratio, I could say I count a whole number of stars as 10, and maybe this time I'll compare it to the 4 black ones. So out of 10 stars, 4 are black, or out of 10, 4 are red. And then a part to whole is if I turn it around and I say, well, let's see, if I look at the part that are black compared to the whole, it's 4 out of 10, or 4 to 10. And then I could say 4/10 of the stars are red. That's the only time where it's going to make sense to turn it into a fraction, right? I wouldn't say 10/4 of the stars are red. That just doesn't even make sense. Okay. So here's the meaning of percent, right? Per, literally, when you look at the word per and cent. And cent stands for 100, right? And if you think about centavos, right, is 100th of a peso. A cent, our penny, is 100th of a dollar. A century is 100 years. My grandma just turned 105 this year, and she is a centenarian because she is over 100. Okay, so I'm going to show you the click on me and show you a quick little video. Okay, so here's my video. I want you to see that this is just a GIF that goes back and forth. And the idea is just that showing you when you see a percent, like you see the 56 and you see the percent symbol, and then you can think of it as that percent line, that's the fraction bar, and then it's over 100. So 56% means 56 out of 100. So again, if you got 56 out of 100 on a test, not a great score, but we can do some comparisons and figure out what how many what you would have gotten if there was only 50 points on the test, or 50 questions. So that's what a percent looks like. It's a fraction out of 100. Okay, so here we go. So here's some examples. Again, ratios compares 2 quantities, right? So Then we looked at the 3 different types of ratios, part to part, whole to part, and part to whole. And then we look at fractions. Those are special types of ratios. It compares a part to a whole. And then percent is just another special type of fraction. So see, this is the big category ratio. Inside ratios are fractions, and then kind of inside the ratio, but really inside of the fraction, it's a special type of fraction. It has to be compared to 100 to be a percent. Okay, here's the key idea that's in your textbook. Again, I want you to think about the denominator has to be 100 to change a number into a percent. And when you see 60 out of 100, that is equal to 60%. So this means the same as that. It's just, does it make sense to put it in a percent, or does it make sense to put it in a fraction form? And then we can even turn it into a decimal. If you think about 60 100ths, okay, this is the tenths, these are the 100ths. So literally, I write the decimal like this, which maybe you can see that this extra 0 is kind of like a phantom 0 and not necessary. So 6 out of 100 is the same as 60 100ths, which is the same as 6 tenths. Okay, it's really cool how all those numbers are related. So now let's look at writing percents as fractions, but this is in a picture form, right? And you might recognize these grids as 100, right? So there's 10 squares times 10 squares. That means there's a total of 100. So to write the percent as a fraction, I'm really just writing as a number out of 100. So I do this. I do 35% is the same thing as 35 out of 100. And now I have to simplify by dividing out greatest common factor, right? You've got your yellow sheet to help you. These are both divisible by 5, so I divide by 5 over 5. I get 7 out of 20, or 7/20. So a fraction in the simplest form, simplifying, is dividing by common factors until they have no more common factors. So 35% is equal to 7/20. All right, now let's look at this. Oh, this seems tricky, but easy but tricky. Write 100% as a fraction in simplest form. Okay, so if I take 100%, remember what I'm going to do every time. I'm going to write the number of the percent on top, and then the bottom is always just 100. And then guess what? 100 divided by 100, that's just 1. It's kind of like this. If I eat the whole candy bar, if I eat 100% of candy bar, I've eaten 1 candy bar. Okay, so now I want you to see this is a fraction less than 1. This was a fraction or percent equal to 1. And now if I think about candy bars, it's 1 plus some extra. So that's why it makes sense that this picture is a percent over 100. And so now we're going to write 174 as a mixed number because it is a number bigger than 1. But I do the same thing that I did before. I write 174%, and the first step is to just write that whole top number as a fraction over 100. Now I've got a couple different ways to do this, right? Remember, I could divide right now and turn it into a mixed number. I also could recognize that this is 1 and this is 74 out of 100. So instead of having something very difficult to simplify, all I have to do is simplify the 74 over 100. So let's do that. Let's do this. So I know my answer is 1 plus this fractional piece. So I'm going to take the 74 over 100, and they're both even. So I'm going to divide it by 2 over 2. And let's see, what do I get? Half of 74 is 35, 37. And half of 100 is 50. And that can't be simplified anymore, right? 37 is a prime number. So I put the fraction and the whole number together, and my answer is 1 and 37/50. So there's my mixed number. So if a percent is greater than 100, if you turn it into a fraction, it is more than 1. Okay, so now here's some OYOs. I don't have the pictures for you, but try to put these percents as a fraction or a mixed number. And I'm just going to point out that if it's less than 1, that's a fraction. If it's greater than 1, sorry, I said 1. If it's less than 100, it's a fraction. If it's greater than 100, it's going to be a mixed number, right? So that's a fraction, and that's a fraction. The only one that's going to be bigger than 1 is the 168%. Okay, so I start by writing 5%.
And I know it's just 5 over 100. And then I look for common factors, divide out. I'm going to divide by 5 and 5, and I get 1/20. So 5% is equal to 1/20. Okay, 168. I'm going to do that thing again where I think about this. If I eat 100% of a candy bar plus another 68%, this I already know is equal to 1 whole. I'm just going to simplify the 68%, which is 68 over 100. Let's see, they're both even. I could divide by 2, or I could try to look for the greatest common factor, which I think would be 4. So if I divide by 4 over 4, I don't have my calculator handy. Once 28, okay, so it goes in 17 times. So the numerator is 17, the denominator is 25. Don't forget that there was a whole number 1 with it because it's greater than 100%. So it is 1 and 17/25. The next fraction is 36%. Oh, remember you are pausing this and trying these on your own and then checking your work. All right, fraction less than 1. We've got 36 over 100. Those are both divisible by 4. Divide by 4 over 4. I get 9/20. That can't be simplified anymore. And the last one, 83 over 100. All right, and that's a little bit of a trick one. You could look at the yellow sheet and see that 83 doesn't have any common factors except for, doesn't have any factors except for 83 in itself. It is a prime number. If it's a prime number, then it has no common factors with 100, and that is as simple as you can get. Okay, here's a bonus question. Try it. Just remember that you start with writing whatever you have as a fraction over 100, and then of course we don't put decimals, are not usually in fractions, so you might have to think about how you turn a decimal into a whole number. All right, so I'm going to turn the 0.25% into what I know a percent is. It's a fraction. I take the 0.25 and I write it over 100. Okay, so that looks a little weird. So what I'm going to focus on is the numerator has a decimal, and there's 2 numbers after the decimal. So I'm thinking about if I multiply by a power of 10 that has 2 zeros, I get rid of that. Don't really care how big the denominator gets. It doesn't really matter. I just know I can't have a decimal in my fraction. So if I multiply the top and the bottom, right, the numerator and denominator get multiplied by 100. That moves the decimal over twice. So I get 25 over, now I have 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so it's a little bit big of a number, but I think that I could start by dividing by 5. Okay, so let's take it step by step. If I divide by 5 over 5, because this number ends in 5 and this number ends in 0, that'll work. I'll get 5 over, okay, mental math. 5 goes into 10 twice, and then there's 3 zeros. So I do this, 2, 1, 2, 3 zeros. All right, the numbers end in 5 and 0 again, so I'm going to divide by 5 one more time. I get 1 over, mental math, 5 goes into 24 times and 2 zeros. So it's 1/400. Now, if my numerator is ever 1, that is as simplified as I can get, right? I can't do anything else with it. That's my fraction. That's a really small fraction. It's 1 out of 400. So that's the same as 0.25%. Okay, that's it for the lesson today. Good luck with the homework.